So the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, their board of governors has finally being the operative word here, they have codified a new rule requiring voters for the Academy Awards, for the Oscars, to actually watch the nominated films. And you might be going, wait, that wasn't a rule? I knew that wasn't a rule, but I think a lot of people just assume that would be part of it, right? So a press release stated, quote, Academy members must now watch all nominated films in each category to be eligible to vote in the final round for the Oscars, end quote. So this is going to go into effect essentially immediately for the 98th Academy Awards, which is March of 2026. So the upcoming Oscars in about a year. It'll be a category by category basis, so it's not like you have to watch everything to vote at all. You know, if you haven't seen all of the cinematography nominees, you know, you can't vote, but if you've seen all the acting ones, you can vote, right? So it's it's category by category. Doesn't necessarily apply to the shortlist round of nominations where people are like throwing out potential nominees. And the way this is going to be verified essentially will be through the members only Academy Screening Room, TM, right? Like that's all Academy Screening Room. This is essentially, because, you know, for a lot of awards ceremonies, or whether it's the Oscars or SAG, members of those organizations get what are called screeners. And back in the day, they were physical copies of the movie, whether it's a VHS or a DVD. Nowadays, it's usually a digital code, a digital file, or even more likely some kind of almost like internal closed network. That's probably the wrong technical word, but like a streaming service only you as a member of this organization have access to. And the movies are only up for that, you know, the voting period, right? So it's not like you just have access. Whereas before, if you had the screeners, you basically just had the movie down. So the way this will work theoretically is that it'll be verified. You know, if you watch it through there, then the Academy knows you have indeed watched this movie. Now, the Wrap does note that the Academy will also plan to implement a quote-unquote seen elsewhere component. You know, if you see it at a festival or some other qualifying experience or venue, that will count, right? No mention of like, well, what if you just see it at like a Regal, or you catch it on streaming before the awards? No mention of that, right? But previously, so again, the big surprise, I think, for a lot of normal people seeing this headline is the surprise that this was not already a requirement. The Wrap notes that previously, the only exceptions to that would have been for Best Foreign Language Film, which is now titled the Best International Feature Film, as well as the Best Documentary Feature, right? You had to prove that you indeed saw all 5 films in each of those categories in theaters, right? At like an official screening for the film. But other than that, all the other categories, is as long as you were eligible on other grounds, you could just vote and not have watched all the nominees. You may very well have not watched any of the nominees. It was really just the honor system. Now, to be fair, you know, in a give or take, an average year sees about 40 feature films and 15 short films nominated every year, which is a lot, to be fair. Especially if you're like a working person, you're someone in the industry working, right? But voters also have access to the Academy Screening Room, right? Like, especially in 2025, it is made incredibly easy, you know, to access these films. And me saying 40 films is a lot. Some of you might be scoffing, like, oh, 40 films. I watch 800 films a year, which maybe is true, but a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, even if you're in the industry, you might necessarily watch one movie a day, every day, right? And again, many voters, you know, because every year before the Oscars, the trades like Deadline or Variety or Hollywood Reporter, they'll publish like anonymous interviews with Academy voters or get like little sound bites, and many of the voters admit with you know, no sense of you know, regret or remorse, they admit to not watching all the films, right? I see in the comments Jacob wrote Dune 2 Justice. 100%. That was like one of the really annoying ones from this past Oscar season. With someone being like, oh, I didn't even bother with Dune Part 2. I couldn't even get through the first one, right? It's like, well then, you shouldn't be voting. Like, then you need to watch these movies to determine what are the best movies, right? And again, this has always been a problem, but it's even more of a concern now, and this is a statement from the Academy, it's more of a concern now because, quote, it's more of a concern, quote, in recent years since the organization massively expanded its membership and brought in a lot of younger members who are busier with their careers, end quote. So that's an interesting kind of way to frame it, that because the Academy has made a lot of efforts to diversify its membership, but when you diversify and your membership base is not primarily old white men who are retired or don't really work all that much anymore, that means that your membership is now a lot busier, right? So that makes sense. And, all in all, this really is a major change for the better. It seems really simple, but I think it's really going to, the same way the expanding the membership, I mean, if you look at the films that have won or even been nominated over the past decade and compare it to the decade prior, it really is like night and day. So many different kinds of films, different genres, different, marginalized communities represented both in front and behind the camera, right? I think you're going to see even more of that now with a change like this. Because ultimately, awards don't matter. And they really shouldn't matter to validate a film's quality. But if the mission is to reflect the best of the best, then we should, then if we're going to do that, if we're going to endeavor on that project, we really should create the framework and conditions so that it best reflects the best of the best, right? Because so many films in multiple categories over the years, this really started in like the 80s with the dawn of like the Oscar bait movie, then really solidified with like the Harvey Weinstein Oscar campaign kind of philosophy, right? So many films just win based off of word of mouth and not the quality. And this is known as coattail voting, where you just go, when you're voting, you just go, well, I didn't see this, but people said it was really good, or, oh, it was so powerful, or, oh, it would be really cool for that person to win. So then they just vote, right? And again, many people are surprised to learn that this wasn't always a rule. And the Hollywood Reporter notes that a rule like this has been standard practice for the BAFTAs, which is essentially the British version of the Academy. This has been standard practice for them for several years now. To be fair, this could still be abused. Like, you could just have someone pull up the movie and then just, like, leave it running and go do something else. But at that point, that's a lot of work to cheese the systems. You may as well just watch the movies at that point. And again, like I said, this really furthers the mission of breaking the Oscar mold, right? Of like what films are Oscar movies. And so I think with this, you're really going to see a lot more unconventional nominations, but more importantly, because this is really where this rule applies, you're going to see a lot more unconventional wins in certain categories. But the unconventionalness won't be because they're not good picks. In fact, they're going to be the movies that probably should have won, or the actors or the people that should have won, but just didn't because not enough people saw that movie. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.